Today's call is all about ADHD and gender. Tyler is off presenting in California today. I think he's in San Diego, he said, and he's doing an ADHD talk live. And so he asked me to step in. So this is such a fun topic because we are so used to the stereotype that when you talk about ADHD, you think of, at least I do, like a 6-year-old little boy bouncing up and down in his seat who can't stay still. And in reality, ADHD does not discriminate. It affects women, men, boys, girls, non-binary. It doesn't matter who you are. Our brains are wired differently. It's just how it is. And so today's topic is going to be all about that and how ADHD doesn't really look the way people think it looks. Let's just jump into it. So what they're finding in most of these studies is that ADHD presents itself differently in men and women and non-binary, not because of the ADHD itself, but a lot of it has to do with societal norms and masking. And so we think of the hyperactive type, and we tend to think that that's more often going to be in one gender or another. And the stereotype, again, is that men and boys will have the hyperactive type and women and girls will have the inattentive type. And realistically, what is causing these misperceptions is that historically, most ADHD research was done on men and boys. Women were pretty much ignored, and girls were definitely not studied for it because we just weren't expected to have that. And so it typically also presents in women and females as quieter, because again, back to that societal and masking, we tend to just work with it. We're like, well, this is how our brains are. I'm just going to run with it and see what I can do. And you're going to come up with your own systems. You're going to come up with your own ways of making it work. Speaking of, I had my loops in and then they started to bug me. So now they're coming out. But for every one female diagnosed with ADHD, there are 2.3 males diagnosed. So we are still seeing in childhood diagnosis this big disparity between the genders. The newest research is suggesting that the severity differences are actually very small between them. So underdiagnosis is more about perception, whether that's from parents, whether that's from doctors, whether that's from teachers. A lot of that has to do with their expectations of how ADHD presents and what they think it looks like. And so therefore, that's what they are looking for. They are looking for those fidgety movements. They're looking for the kids who can't sit still. They're looking for the ones who run their mouth and talk too much and have to go get put in the corner away from everyone else. That's what they're looking for. They're not looking for the girl who's sitting at her desk doing this with her fingers because inside she can't wait to jitter and jump and move, but she knows she's not supposed to because she's following the rules that are set for her. And so they're not looking for that. So that girl gets underdiagnosed. They're not looking for the ones whose brain is spinning so fast and they're taking their notes and they're doing their things. But as soon as they walk out of that classroom or that office or wherever they are, everything that was just said to them is completely gone. So part of this is going to be a lot of attention and awareness and knowledge around what those symptoms look like for everybody, not just for the men and the boys. The diagnostic bias against different genders presenting it in different ways, I think part of that is going to come from, again, them being told, here's how we actually diagnose this. Here's the symptoms you need to look for. Here's the way these brains work and why they're different. You'll also find that girls and women are definitely diagnosed more often with the inattentive type simply because we have figured out how to mask it. I know myself, I was put in this little box of like, here's what you do, here's how you succeed, here's how you grow through school. And I would channel my ADHD into hyperfocusing. I could knock out a paper the night before it was due, stay up, get an A+ on it, and move on with my life. And that pattern just would repeat. And now as an adult, I figured out that's not sustainable. I can't continue to do this. I can't continue to operate this way. So my diagnosis didn't come until I was 40 years old. And I know there's a lot of other women that are facing the same thing. We're that late in life diagnosis because we were generally overlooked as children. And a lot of us, again, back to those genetics, we are now raising ADHD children, neurodivergent children, and we're seeing a lot of those patterns that we had growing up show up in them. And therefore, we're getting diagnosed because our children are also getting diagnosed, and we're recognizing that. Would women who grew up in traditional families present different than women who grew up with a single or widowed mom? I would say that a lot of that is going to have to do with what are your roles in the family and what are your roles growing up. Because if you were expected to be the quiet, subservient, gender stereotypical girl, yeah, you're going to learn to mask early on. You're going to learn to cover that up and not be a fidgety person and take that and internalize your ADHD rather than showing it externally. Culture is definitely a big influence in this. I am very into the studies that they're now doing and seeing how they play out and how this is going to change when people are diagnosed, how they're diagnosed, and how they're treated. Because it's so different now than when we were kids. And even and bringing that into adulthood, masking is a very big thing. It gives you comfort when you can mask, but then also you now have to recover after you're masking. I find I'm more jittery in hyper type settings than I am at home. Yeah, I love that, Jason, how like you're basically feeding off of the energy around you. And so if you find yourself in a high energy setting, you're going to externalize that. Um, and that could definitely play into, again, those gender roles too, as like it's fine for men to be active, athletic, and hyperactive. Like that's a normal thing for us to see. Whereas women are typically expected to be more composed, more quiet, that sort of societal expectation, which in my opinion is a bunch of BS. So um, you'll also find that some of the gender differences in like symptom patterns. So again, back to being adults, women do tend to have a lot of things happening where we are responsible for a lot of the mental load. And so as people with ADHD and executive dysfunction, when you start adding all of those tasks to our plate, it gets really heavy, really hard to manage all of it, and the executive dysfunction shows up. So that's another reason why we're starting to see so many women get diagnosed later in life. It's a lot of that because we're no longer able to mask, we're no longer able to function. We reach burnout and we're like, what do we do now? So one of the reports was talking about how adult women often report greater impairment for handling stress, for functioning in society, and for just their mood in general, even though their ADHD symptom scores might actually be lower than a man's or someone else. So there's this push and pull that's related to gender and expectations. And then you also run into where hormones play into all of this too. So there's a lot of studies that are now happening, and I'm so thankful for them that they're studying women's hormone cycles and how that affects your mental health and how during different times of the month your ADHD and your brain operate differently than other times of the month. And I am absolutely loving how many tools and techniques there are and how much knowledge there is on structuring your life and your day and your schedule to help with that. And so that's another big thing and a big difference between them. Men don't really have that, as it doesn't affect them the same way as it does women. So you run into that a lot. And they're finding that a lot, again, late in life diagnosis, perimenopause, and ADHD, we're seeing a lot of overlap between them where we are literally thinking we're going crazy and we go in and you get one or the other or both as your diagnosis. So For those who maybe you don't have an official diagnosis yet, but you're here because you know that you fit this mold, you fit this type, this is how your brain works. Your feelings are valid, even if you don't have the official piece of paper from a doctor saying that you have ADHD. If the tools and the techniques and the things we do to help work, run with it. The diagnosis is great because it does help you know that you are just um you're a zebra, you're not a weird horse. So that diagnosis, that label is fantastic. But it's not the end all be all. So we are so happy that everyone's here to learn, even if you don't have that actual diagnosis. And into the diagnosis talk about misdiagnosis, you run into a lot of other things that when you do start the diagnostic process, depending on who your provider is and what their expectations, what their stereotypes, what their knowledge base looks like, you may end up with a misdiagnosis. ADHD is often mistaken for depression, anxiety, borderline personality, bipolar, or sometimes you're just told it's just stress. You just need to calm down. But there's their finding now is that women and gender diverse individuals often have higher rates of anxiety, depression, and eating disorders, and and a lot of the times they're comorbidity with ADHD or a neurodivergence. It's not like you might just have one; you might have both, and that's okay. But ADHD starts in childhood. And masking complicates all of that because when you go to the doctor and they ask you questions, you're going to answer it to the best of your ability. But if you have a system that helps you solve that, and they ask you, "Oh, do you struggle with XYZ?" Well, no, I don't. But in your head, you're like, "Oh, it's because I do this, this, and this." That's not what a neurotypical person does. Neurotypical person just does whatever it is with no problems, where we have to have like a system of reminders and timers and all the things to go with it. Alongside that, how I was saying gender diverse individuals often have comorbidities along with women. There's also a higher prevalence of ADHD among LGBTQ plus populations. They find that it's 2 to 3 times more common in ADHD samples to find same sex and gender diverse identities. And then trans individuals are actually 5 to 10 times more likely to have ADHD or neurodivergence. That's all like this is all new studies. These are all things that they're finally starting to put pieces together and recognize. And it's wonderful because we're starting to recognize that human beings are not just this box or this box. They're all the boxes. And we're able to figure out, like, oh, this works for this person and this works for this person. They're studying that right now. Don't know. That's exactly what they're looking into is whether it's causational, correlational, what it is. Or if it's simply that because somebody is in one community and out, that they're also open to the concept of being out as a neurodivergent. Because as we know, a lot of people just mask it and they don't tell people about their diagnosis or their feelings or how their brain works. So it could be a lot of things, but I'm excited to see what all of those studies look like. Tyler sent me a whole bunch of links to different articles and different studies and really fun stuff in prep for this call. So we're going to send that out to the group too. So that way you guys can do a deep dive if you're also hyper focusing on this the way that we are. So, so back to talking about like treatment. So standard ADHD meds work for all genders, but you still have to tailor it to each person, each individual's needs and obviously their life. And then the thing to take into account for those born female is hormones. If you have a provider, you want to make sure that they are aware of the cycle of hormones and how your meds can affect you. And if they have any expectations or ideas on how to make them work better for you different times of the month. You can also obviously, I mean, and we all should be in some form of coaching or therapy or something like that, which is why we're here. But you want to address obviously masking fatigue. When we mask too much, we use a lot of energy. And how do you recover from that? Perfectionism is a huge thing for those of us born female. We are expected to be perfect in many ways growing up, where boys are allowed to run and be dirty and boys will be boys. Girls are expected to follow rules and be the helpers and be the assistants. And especially if you are an eldest daughter, that's just part of your role in life. And you take that into adulthood. You also want to make sure that you're advocating for yourself. So if you have a provider that you feel is not listening to you, is not following up with you the way you'd like, and is not really paying attention to the gender differences, where they're saying, "Oh no, you are just inattentive," and you're thinking to yourself, "No, why does my foot constantly tap, and why am I sitting here doing this with my fingers all the time or picking my nails?" You might want to find somebody who has a different perspective on it and can see it from the full picture rather than the stereotypical side. My favorite part of this talk that we were working through was the myths and misconceptions. So I'm going to kind of bust through these pretty fast, but these are things that we in the community already know because we talk about this all the time. But some of these are myths that people in your circle probably believe and don't understand about ADHD. So we can kind of become ambassadors and talk about some of these things with them. So myth one is ADHD is just for boys. Come on now. Reality obviously is that women and non-binary individuals are also significantly affected. And if we have children, we want to be watching for those symptoms in both types of and in both genders of our kids. Myth: quiet and inattentive is not ADHD. Reality is that inattentive ADHD does exist. It is real. Some people have it, some people have hyperactive, some people have combined. It's different in every individual. And that's why it's key to have the full picture and not just one little bit of it. Myth that women don't have ADHD, they just have anxiety or depression. Also not true. Neurodivergence is such a complex set of symptoms and set of the way our brains. I hate calling it symptoms. Like truly, that is so negative to me. I much prefer just to say our brains are wired differently. But the anxiety and depression are there. They are real for a lot of people, but it's not an in place of. It's a along with. So the comorbidity of neurodivergence is so big and so vast, and we're really just starting to learn what it all looks like for us. Another myth: hormones don't matter. Yeah, they do, and you may need to adjust your treatment depending on what your hormones are doing at a particular time of the month. So it might mean that on a low week, you don't book your calendar out like a crazy person. You maybe get one thing done a day and that's it. You do big rocks only. But on a week where you've got all the energy and all the feelings and ready to go, that's when you tackle your big project. That's when you do all your main lead gen and appointments. So tailoring your schedule to fit your cycle and your energy levels is something huge. And even if you're not on meds and you're only managing it through scheduling, talk therapy, and community based, you have control over that. You can kind of monitor and figure out what works best for you. I know for me, that is how I set up my schedule. I know which weeks I can do amazing things, awesome things, and get all my prep done. And I know which weeks I'm going to be a slug on the couch, and you are lucky if I answer my phone. It's probably just going to be text messages. But those days I'm like, yep, big rock's done. I'm good to go. So don't be afraid to use your schedule to help with your treatment. And then the last one is ADHD goes away with age. My favorite part about this is that one, we know it's not true. And two, because ADHD and neurodivergence are genetic, when my family gets together, it is absolutely hilarious to see the generations of ADHD all together. And it doesn't go away with age. All that happens is you just get better at managing it. You get better at figuring out what works and what doesn't. And so I think it was a really fun exercise for us, but go look back through your family. Go think back to you, yeah, especially when they don't have it. Yeah. When you get an older generation that's like ADHD wasn't a thing growing up, and yet they were the ones who were like focused on running 2 miles a day because they had to get their energy out somehow. Yeah, ADHD didn't exist. Or the ones who are like autism didn't exist, and yet they have a whole train collection. Let's be real. So it's very easy to see that it's genetic when you put everybody together and you start looking at the pieces of it. Uh, so yeah, so what I was saying is I would challenge you to go back through your family too and think about the family stories, and see what age anybody grew out of it, because I can guarantee they didn't. My biggest thing for y'all would be just I want to encourage everybody to bring awareness to this. I know some people are out and talking about it, and I mean, I tell people I have ADHD. I'm not afraid to talk about it to people, and I know others are as well. So start talking about it. I mean, the conversation is there. People need to start understanding that it's not just for boys, and you don't grow out of it. It's not just kids who have ADHD. We are functioning, amazing business owners whose brains just are wired different from birth. And whether you are male, a female, a non binary, trans, whatever you identify as, you're valid. Your feelings are valid. Your brain is valid. And it's ADHD is real for everybody. It just presents differently, and not because of the ADHD, but a lot of it is because of societal expectations and all of the things that come with it. So we want to recognize the quiet stories, the people who are kind of in the background who might be struggling a little bit and don't understand why. So keep an eye out for those people and reach a hand out and pull them in and help them see that they are amazing and that their brains are amazing, um, and that they can do this too. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you as always.